Dan, thank you very much for joining me today. First question really is, obviously, being such a big radio DJ presenter that you are now for Radio X, do you remember hearing Oasis for the first time when you were younger?
I do. I think the first real memory I've got was the Battle of Britpop, summer of '95, Oasis versus Blur, and I was working that summer. I was only 13, and that's why I remember it. And all summer long, I sort of heard the hype building of that sort of seminal moment, that sort of chart history. And then from then on in, I was sort of obsessed with both bands. But I was I was kind of I was always a little bit more Oasis because I was living in Scotland at the time. But um, I think I listened to both bands quite equally. But yeah, that was the main sort of launch pad for me into music. I was 13 at the time, so I vividly remember basically working on a farm picking fruit and strawberries that summer and listening to those songs on the radio on cassette. Um, yeah,
So would you
that's
say
what I
that Oasis sort of maybe does their music would it influence you to become a radio DJ? Obviously, there's so many bands that influence people to want to present and want to work that kind of thing. Would you say that they were one of the bands that maybe spurred you on a little bit to be able to play their stuff live?
Well, yeah, because I mean, I guess the thing that I always wanted to do was be on the radio, and part of that was exposing people to new music, but also like I really enjoy the intimacy of radio and audio in general because that's what I got from it. I was quite a lonely kid in terms of like where I grew up. I was quite isolated. I lived in the country. My friends lived really far away from me, so I didn't get to see them all the time. And the one constant was radio. So, I understood that that's how I was kind of going to be exposed to the wider world. And I guess that's what still excites me to this day. That's why I know how important it is to people, even though these days, there's all sorts of content, there's all sorts of distractions that people can consume, but still, it's still one of the benefits and one of the stronger points of radio that, social media can be divisive. Social media can make you feel shit about yourself, but I think it's very rare that something like radio can do that to you.
Yeah.
To me, it was always an intimate, positive thing.
Mm.
Um, that brought company. So, the bands that I listen to and all those things, they have in some way informed my style on the radio. They've informed my passion, what I want to do, what I want my North Star and my guiding light to be in terms of how I do a show or what I do. So, yeah, for sure, those early memories kind of imprinted in me
Mm.
about how important, um, not just radio is, but, what you do with it, who you play, and how you package things up. And that goes across the board for news, events, music, cultural
Yeah.
references, whatever, all
Would you
that
say
stuff.
that? Yeah. So would you say that obviously playing Oasis on the radio, they're arguably bigger now than they have been for years. So would you say you have a sort of like a go-to tune or like songs that always get good reactions on the radio?
Well, not really, because most radio, I mean, look, I don't know lots about the BBC, but I know most of the BBC is also playlisted. So all radio is playlisted to a certain extent these days. So, all decisions are informed by committee, by listeners. Most stations work in the same way that you'll have 500 people who'll get a list of songs. And this can be, I mean, some places will do this once a month, some places will do it more, depending if they've got lots of new music. And you'll get listeners who are, let's just say, hardcore, right? They're quite consistent. They listen to the station a lot, so they hear the music a lot. And they will vote on um, a level of passion for it. So, a band like Oasis, who've got this massive back catalogue, you're always going to have lots of spicy numbers that people like, but you can overplay those songs. So you have to rest these songs for a while, and then maybe a year or two down the line, you can kind of bring them back into the mix.
Yeah.
So everything is informed by committee and decision. Nothing is happening by accident, and that is across radio in general, because we know that people aren't listening for 6 hours a day. Most people are listening for somewhere between 20 minutes and an hour, probably tops a day, if you're lucky.
Mm.
And in that, you need to sort of balance out what the mix of music they're getting is. So we don't have go-tos, but we know we have successful songs, you know,
Yeah.
and they are all informed by our listeners,
Yeah.
really. you know.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So obviously, I want to tap into a little bit about your interview with Noel. So you were very lucky enough to interview the man himself. Was it last week or the week before about his upcoming album,
Yeah,
Capital Skies? How was it?
yeah.
What was the reaction like? Was it enjoyable? Was it interesting?
Um, well, Noel's really good because he's always got an opinion on something, and he'll always give you good answers. The problem is these days, everything has to be pre-recorded, and everything is also heavily edited. So, if the people around him don't want certain things in the interview, they'll take it out. Back in the day, that didn't really happen. Um, Noel will just say something and be in the interview. So there's lots of things that we said that weren't allowed to be broadcast, which is a shame. But that's the way it goes. That's what you have to do. Um, it's always a privilege to talk to people who have meant so much to people, and and I include myself in that. So I've never lost sight of that. I enjoy it. I enjoy, maybe 4 or 5 of us will sit around and we'll fire backwards and forwards, lots of ideas, what people are talking about, and we'll look at questions people have asked before, what's been done, what's hot at the moment, what are people talking about. So, for us, we had about 4 or 5 people look through the things that had come up in the last month or so. So, Nepo Baby was always going to be big, so we had to ask him about that because Ines is quite out there as a spokesperson for her family sometimes and herself. So, those things are easy wins. You basically go, here's one thing, here's another, and you put them together and you form the question.
Mm.
And then there's other private things that I think you get to ask, and it's up to them whether they answer it or not. But Noel's always pretty much an open book, so he's good for that. And he's been around for so long, he knows how to play the game, he knows what to say, he knows what to do. And he's also somebody who will change his mind tomorrow. So he'll say something, he won't give a shit. And you know what I mean? Because tomorrow he'll just change his mind about what he's just said the day before. Because I don't think he's overthinking it. He doesn't. I suppose he has such a freedom with who he is as a person. He's in his 50s. He's had the best life you can have. There ain't much holding him back, so it doesn't really matter. Do you know what I mean? It'd be very difficult for him to fuck up at this stage.
Yeah.
So he'll just be himself and be a really great interview. I mean, I've never heard him do a bad interview. Although recently, and this isn't a criticism, but every time he's turned up recently in the last few years, he's always got a hangover. I mean, it can be a good thing. It makes some people a little bit more open, but most of the time it makes it a little bit harder because you're fighting the hangover before you get into the question.
Yeah. So obviously now Liam and Noel are both in their separate things. We know how successful they've both been individually. Would you say you have a preference, or would it be controversial to have a preference?
I don't think it's controversial to have a preference. In my experience, Liam has cultivated something quite spectacular online, and he's also dodged a few bullets. Do you know what I mean? Like he's managed to pull off some impressive things, and I think what he managed to do was be himself on social media, and that meant that people got to relate to him in a different way to what Noel's done, because Noel stayed away from all that. You know what I mean? For a long time, it was Noel's team posting for him. Whereas, when Liam's posting boom shaka laka rastas at 6:45 in the morning, he's probably been up all night and, doing his own thing. And again, not short of an opinion or two, but he's done it all himself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's attractive and appealing to people. And I think it's attractive and appealing to people because, I mean, how old are you?
I'm 19.
Right, so you're 19, right? So, you think about anyone under, I don't know, 25. I don't know anyone under 25 who risks having an opinion publicly these days because it's just not worth it. Why would you? You know what I mean? It's like you'll get destroyed, people will pull you down, they'll tear you down, you'll get cancelled, whatever. And I'm being quite extreme, but you've got a difficult situation to be a young pop star or a young person in a band or a young person in general now because of the way social media works.
Yeah.
And that's informed everybody's life who's now in that age group since they were, I don't know, 8, 9, 10. And, when you regularly get online or your mum and dad give you an iPad and a phone and all that stuff. So he grew up in a time where we didn't have that. Do you know what I mean? It's like the internet, people weren't even regularly using the internet at the Battle of Britpop in 1995. I remember we didn't get the internet in school. I remember the first time we had a computer in school, and they were like, and we're going to learn about this thing called the internet. That was 1997. So they've grown up and gone through a different time,
Mm.
And I think that's really appealing to a younger audience who are discovering Oasis songs, discovering Liam and the idea of rock and roll, because it's not really something you can do. It doesn't seem like something you could really be these days. You know, it's
Yeah.
just too dangerous. I mean, it's going to fuck your life up if you're going to try and be Liam Gallagher in 2022. But he can be Liam Gallagher. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And that's even for him. It's a fine line. You know, he walks a really fine line.
Mm.
And if there was ever a question of who was going to end up coming off badly out of social media between Noel and Liam, it probably would be Liam. You
Yeah.
know, it's like Liam will be the one to fucking stand on a landmine and blow himself up.
Yeah.
I don't think Noel would do that.
So
So that was a very long answer to the
yeah.
question. I don't actually have a favorite. I think they're both entertaining in different ways.
Yeah.
For me, it's a luxury because I can go and hang out with him and interview him and talk to him at gigs and stuff like that, and I'll get him. But he isn't like Liam, you know, dishing it every day on social media. Whereas I can enjoy Liam from a distance, and sort of and enjoy him for what he is. But you know, I also know that, like I said, I think Liam's the one who could maybe fall foul of the
Yeah.
internet and social media in general. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So obviously, I think it was last week or the week before, we saw a tweet off Liam that went quite viral, saying that he'd been on the phone to Noel, he'd been begging him on his knees for this reunion and whatever. And then obviously it came out, it was quite viral from your interview with Noel when he came out and said that you can never say never. So, in your honest opinion, do you think that we will ever see an Oasis reform?
I think I think it's possible. Um, you know, like Noel said 1,000 times, you know, never say never, and they don't need the money. So what needs to happen is there needs to be a passing of time, however long that is, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, probably more likely, and then there'll be this kind of reset amongst them, I'm sure, because at the moment, I think there's too much bad blood.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what Liam says, that's whatever Liam says is all bullshit. Clearly, because you know from every other aspect of the story, whoever you speak to, including Noel, there is still animosity there within the family. So it's not likely to happen in the next couple of years, I don't think. But you know, time's a great healer, and I mean, even my own personal experience of being around families who fall out, you know, Northern brothers, my family's exactly the same. You know, my dad doesn't speak to his brothers, but, you know, they've come together occasionally for greater good. And I think that, I mean, one thing I wanted to put to Noel and I didn't, and I think this is a really important point to make, is at some point they both have to see that it's not probably about them anymore. You know, Oasis and playing shows to 60, 70,000 people in a stadium is more about the people and the people who put them there.
Yeah.
Rather than their petty differences. And in a way, there's an interview with Matty Healy that he did a couple of days ago, which kind of makes that point. You should look it up if you haven't watched it, if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm kind of saying the same thing as Matty, but just maybe a little bit more direct. Like,
Yeah.
essentially, nobody else is in that situation. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's like it's so much bigger than them to be able to deliver that to, you know, millions of people around the world. At some point, I think that'll be the thing that pulls them back together. Because, you know, Noel doesn't need the money. He gets all the songwriting rights. He's got all the Oasis money. Liam's just done 250,000 tickets at Nebworth. He's had a couple of successful tours and a couple of successful albums. He's going to be sweet for money now.
Yeah.
It won't be about money. It doesn't need to be about money. So it'll have to be about something else. And I think it'll be about the timing being right, and it'll be about the fans.
Yeah.
Be about going out and doing that again.
Yeah. So Dan, I don't want to keep you very long. So just to finish off very quickly, one answer, one or two words. What is your favorite Oasis album?
I mean, it's always. I mean, for a while it was A sides, B sides. I know, but I mean, it's definitely maybe.
Yeah.
You know, definitely maybe for me is that introduction to music. Do you know what I mean? It was like schooling, and I think coming of age around that time, you know, in the sort of mid-90s was just a phenomenal time for music, and a brilliant time to be discovering all that incredible stuff that was happening around Britpop at the time. That was happening around, you know, house music as well and dance music. It was just, you know, it was awesome. It was just a brilliant time. We'd just had you know, Nirvana explode with Nevermind and Pearl Jam and all that West Coast stuff as well. And then we were doing our own massive thing in the UK, and it was just awesome. And I feel really lucky to have experienced that coming of age time with all those albums, going into HMV and Our Price and buying those albums and looking at the album covers and then, and going for it. But I mean, there's a lot of albums that you could say this about, but the one thing I think to Dead Cert for Definitely Maybe, it's probably one of the albums I've bought the most in my life because I've lost it so many times, but that's a perfect 10 for me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think if I had to, I haven't really thought about this, but I mean, I think Definitely Maybe. I mean, Be Here Now's almost a 10, is it? I think Be Here Now is also very good. But I was thinking, like, I could say that about Arctic Monkeys, whatever people say I am, Killers, Hot Fuss, maybe Block Party, Silent Alarm. There are lots of 10s, but that Definitely Maybe was my first kind of like, wow, this is a real 10. You know what I mean? It's like every single song you just go back and you listen to it and you listen to it and you listen to it and you wear out the CD, so you have to go and buy it again, or you take it to a house party to go and play it to people because it's so fucking good.
Yeah.
And someone nicks it or you lose it, so you buy it again. That was my first experience of that. So I think that's the album I'd go for.
Yeah.
Even though I did love Be Here Now a lot as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a perfect way to end the interview there. So, Dan, once again, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to chat to you. Thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you so much, mate.
No worries, Harry. Take it easy.